When you're doing business as an introvert, there are definite disadvantages, advantages, and challenges. And so we're going to talk about that today. But before we continue, if you're into entrepreneurship in the creative industry and living your best remote work life, be sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on all notifications because you don't want to miss out, and throw me a like if you enjoyed the show. All right, let's do this. So, an introvert is typically a very reserved or quiet person that tends to be introspective and enjoys spending time alone. And so, I'm not really a totally quiet person. I've taken the Myers Briggs personality test, the Enneagram. I've done a lot of different personality tests. I find them very interesting because I do those same types of things with some of the branding work that I do. I do a brand personality archetype quiz, which is like a personality test, but for businesses. And so, this whole concept of personality and the fact that many of us share very similar types of traits that can be predictable, that can be understood, and that can be worked with, I think is a very fascinating thing that's out there that has been discovered. And so I I'm an INTJ, which is somebody that is a introvert, but that is assertive. So the A is for assertive. So I do tend to speak my mind on important things, but I scored like 98% introvert on this test. I don't know what question I answered that didn't get me the full 100, but I I score always super high on the introvert side of the test. And when the whole lockdown situation happened with COVID, obviously that was a horrible situation for a lot of people. A lot of people hated it. I hated it for a number of reasons that I won't get into. But the one thing about it that I didn't actually mind was basically 2 weeks to stay at home and not go anywhere. And so I didn't mind that part at all. But then as time goes on and I'm basically, at home and everyone else is at home, this is like an introvert's dream, right? Because nobody's out doing things and I could just stay and focus and lock in and do the things that I like doing, that I'm interested in doing, where I feel like I have an environment that I have control over, right? And so while extroverts have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, introverts have something called JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. And if you're an extrovert and you're listening to this, you're like, man, you guys are so boring. And I know that because I'm married to an extrovert. And so sometimes she has a very hard time understanding me. You're not an introvert. You like people. You like doing things. You like, and I say, yeah, I do. It's kind of like ice cream for me, where you like it. You just don't want to have ice cream all the time, 24/7, right? You like it, but it needs to be in at the times that you feel comfortable enjoying it. You got to space it out a little bit. So I'm kind of like that with people, where I love people, I enjoy people. I just need a break from people most of the time. I'll just say that. And so there are some, I think, really great advantages of being an introvert in a remote work type of situation. So, one of the advantages, obviously, is you're working remotely. You don't want an office. You don't need an office. You don't need people and a water cooler and little chit chat conversations happening. You don't want any of that. You just want to be left alone so you can focus on what you're doing, execute things, get stuff done, create amazing work, whatever it is you're doing. You don't have to think about other people and all of these other things that you don't have control over. And you're energized by the ability to be alone and execute those tasks. And so I think overall, it's really a perfect type of situation for people that are more introverted, is they're very energized and fueled by this type of situation, especially introverted creatives, because I feel like I can do my best creative work when I'm alone and focused. And I think a lot of it has to do with control, is the feeling that you have control over your situation. So, like, I have the ultimate introvert office. I built this in my attic. It's behind a secret door in the wall to where when I'm in here, it's impossible to tell that this room even exists. I'm completely sealed off from the world. I'm in my own little private space in the universe where I can just do my stuff and make magic happen. I have complete control over my environment. I got my hammock, I've got my lighting, I've got all my stuff in here, my equipment, my tools, and I can just do my thing. And I love that. When I'm outside of my office and I'm talking to other people and they are involved in different things that I don't know a lot about, and they're bringing up different conversations. They talk about sports. I'm not into sports. Sorry, I can't do it. I don't have any interest in it. I played 4 years of high school football, but that was mostly so I could hit people during the day, which is kind of violent, but I didn't ever really sit down and watch football. My dad did, but I just never got into it. I always had my pad and my pen and I was always drawing. I like to be in my head more. I think when you're an introvert and you're dealing with other people, it's a situation you don't have total control over. You don't know how to control it. But you do enjoy working alone because then you have complete control and it's okay. And you can make great things happen. And so that's, I think, the main difference between an introvert and an extrovert. An extrovert doesn't care about the control. They love the fact that things are happening around them and they like to ride that wave. They just like surf the feeling of life and enjoy it. Whereas introverts were more architects. We like to build and structure things. And when that structure is missing, we feel naked and exposed and uncomfortable. And so we retreat back to those things that we feel give us control. That's just my personal feeling about it. But there are some disadvantages. So I think one of the key disadvantages to being a remote worker, especially a solopreneur, is the fact that it's hard to network because you don't have the people around you all the time. And it's so easy to just live in your own world that you don't get out and actually network with people. And I think extroverts have a huge advantage over us in that respect to where they will go out, be around people, and it opens up so many opportunities for business. And I see extroverts who network and they do very, very well. They're very successful. And I am a bit envious of that. I know I just got to get out there and communicate with people. It's just hard for me to do. I've had lots of success. I know I could push it way beyond that. And so I've been trying to unlock that part of myself. And so it's not a disadvantage. And I think there's ways you can do it. And we'll kind of go into that a little bit. You can seem very distant and apathetic. And that's not a good thing. You don't want to be distant from other people, so distant that they think that you don't care about them and their lives. Because you do really passionately care about people, but you struggle because you need that time alone, right? And it's very easy to become a workaholic. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first started out is I was so afraid that I wouldn't have the discipline to run my own business remotely. And I mean, this is the early 2000s, 2001 to 2005. Yeah, right around that range. And I didn't want to be a slacker. I didn't know myself well enough at that time to know if I had the discipline. So I basically decided to become a workaholic. I know it sounds stupid, but my young mind at the time, I was like, I got to train myself and get extreme discipline so I have complete control over my life. In doing that, I had the illusion of control. I did have control or like insane control over my ability to work. But on the flip side of that, I completely lost control overall of navigating my life and really doing what I wanted and living the life that I wanted. And that was a huge tragedy. I mean, I actually injured myself pretty badly. Just to give you an example, I had a project that I shouldn't have taken on, but I wanted it, and it was do illustrations for this book. And I did some experimental illustrations, and I found that it would take me about I I could do about 3 to 4 illustrations a day max. There was no way I could do more than that. There just wasn't enough time. They required too much detail, and there wasn't a way for me to do them faster. So I started saying, okay, how many illustrations would I need to do per day? And there's no way I could do it. The only way I could do it is by not sleeping. And so I worked completely through the night 4 times in 2 weeks. This is how it worked. I would get up Monday morning. So I would sleep Sunday night. I would wake up Monday morning. I would sit at my computer and I would start working. And I would be in that chair all day. I would eat. I'd come back, sit down. I'd eat again. I'd get my, bathroom breaks and everything. I'd come back, sit down, and I would work all through the night into the morning. And then I would keep working. I would eat again, go to the bathroom, eat again, keep working all the way as late as I could to the next night. Then I would go to sleep. I would wake up the next morning and then I would work all day long, all through the night, still sitting at that chair, all through the next day. And then I'd go to sleep again. I had 2 weeks back to back like that. I finished the project just in time, but that was kind of my mentality. I could force myself to go to the extremes to get stuff done. And I thought that was self-control, but really it was self-torture. And I got into these habits of pushing my body to the limits of sedentariness. Is that a word? To where I gained weight, my whole core, my whole muscular structure began to change. My back became hunched, my lower back bulged outwards. And when I went to lift these two beams in my backyard, I crushed my L5S1 disc in my back. And to this day, I have just a massive bulge disc. It's degenerative, so it's going to give me problems in the future. And I have what's called foraminal narrowing and arthritis all over that area. I just destroyed my back. I destroyed my health at 25 years old. I had the back of like a 120-year-old person. And I lived with extreme horrifying pain for years and years and years. I had microdiscectomy surgery, physical therapy, switched to an anti-inflammatory diet. About 12 years ago, I switched to a plant-based diet. I had to make a lot of changes, but I missed out on so much, like going on rides with my kids at theme parks and doing fun things. I had to sit out. I was so terrified I was going to cause a flare up in my back because they would happen and it would be horrifying pain that would paralyze me practically, where I couldn't move my legs. And there were times where I'd have to grab my left leg getting into the car and pull my leg into the vehicle. And I would wake up in the morning and I'd essentially be paralyzed where I couldn't move. And it's scary. And all of that because the illusion of control of being a workaholic and doing all that, it was stupid and foolish. And I vowed to never do that again. So I go to the gym 3 days a week. I do cycle in between for cardio, HIIT training. And so, yeah, I lost all that weight. I got into shape. I've strengthened my body and everything's been going great. But I learned, man, the hard way really early. You got to take care of yourself. You have to prioritize your health. You don't want to be in a situation where you ruin your health for work, you know? And one of the things that really helped me was I heard this phrase and I can't remember where I heard it, but it was just the work is never done. And sometimes when you do all that work and you knock a project out and you're like, done, I finished the project, there's that little bit of satisfaction. But then the next day there's more and there's more and there's more and there's always work. It's impossible. It's kind of like scooping water out of the ocean and dumping it back into the ocean. You can do it all day long and feel like you got a good day's work in, but there's still tomorrow. There's going to be more water to lift up and dump. And so it's never going to end. The work is never, ever done. What you can control is how much you're working in your day. There have been studies that have shown that you really only have about 4 hours of good solid work in you per day. And after that, you start drifting off. And one of my favorite books that relates to this is called Indistractable by Neriel. And in that book, he talks about this really compelling concept as to why we allow ourselves to become distracted and what the root of that is. And what he suggests is that the reason we will distract ourselves is because we're trying to avoid having a feeling that we don't want to feel, essentially. For example, if I'm in a situation where I'm around people and all of a sudden I start to feel awkward and comfortable, you pull out your phone and you're just basically trying to avoid that feeling. So you go and you do something else. Or if you're working and you've been slaving away all day and you haven't taken very many breaks, you start pulling up YouTube and watching videos, or you start reading something else. You know, you got this important thing to do, but you kind of go off on this tangent. It's because doing those other things, it gives you those dopamine hits. Those feelings feel better than the feeling of staring that project in the face and doing the thing that you need to do. So you allow yourself to become distracted. Well, if you're just working all day long, what you end up doing is interspersing these little bits of distraction throughout your day to where, yeah, you can work an 8-hour day, but how much really hard work got done during that period? Not very much. But if you set aside like your morning and you set aside, you say your whole work day is going to be 4 hours and that you're going to devote your best, your highest energy into getting that done. And you just dump and get everything done in that time, then you've used up all of your main core thinking and energy for the day. And so there's really no point in working the rest of the day. You could literally work a 4-hour day and go off and do other things and let it be because you know it's going to be there tomorrow. But now, tomorrow, when you need to work on those things, you're going to be fully energized and you're going to be able to put all this energy into it and get those things done. And so that's been kind of my goal over the past year is getting to that point where I can work essentially a 4-hour day, put my best effort into those 4 hours, and then just live life and enjoy life. And instead of living to work, I work to live because I got to provide for my family and everything. But I can do it smarter. I can do it in ways that frees me up to do things that I want to do. I can go to the gym in the middle of the day or the afternoon, or I could go out and go paddleboarding, or I could talk to my kids and walk the dog. And I can actually go out and do things in my life that allow my brain to rest, be richly fulfilled. And then when I am working, I can bring my best efforts to the table without distractions. And so to me, that feels like a much smarter way to go. It's healthier, both physically and mentally, and it leads to a much more rich and fulfilled life. I like the idea of the fact that your mind, your will is powerful. That's more powerful than your body, than any other proclivity or whatever that you may have mentally. You can overcome those things by sheer will. And I have learned how powerful my mind is. I just haven't used it properly in a lot of respects over the years. But I've learned from those things and I've been able to apply myself to expanding my ability to experience things and have a more fulfilled life. One of my goals that I've been working on is trying to ask better questions. And so a lot of times when you're around other people, I'll tend to just go on and talk about things that I know a lot about. And I think I make people's eyes glaze over and they're like, oh, there goes Steve blabbing off again. So what I've been trying to do is reverse the situation to where I'm asking people about things in their life that I'm actually interested in. I'm getting into their minds and I'm learning about them. And I've often found that finding interesting questions to ask and having those conversations can be very enriching and valuable. And it allows you to kind of experience some of the things that extroverts experience, but in an introverted way. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but finding introverted ways to do extroverted things is kind of what I'm saying. And so find fulfillment doing things you enjoy with other people. That also helps your brain to stay sharp and it helps you to live a more fulfilled life. Like for me, one of the things I enjoy doing with other people are games because games introduce a structure to human interaction. And I like that structure of a game. And so we'll play board games and card games and things like that. And it allows me to converse with other people and have conversations because the game is there as well. The game is almost like a crutch in a way to being able to bridge that introvert extrovert kind of gap. And I think the same thing that can happen with networking. I used to go to networking events. I signed up for Meetup. And when I moved back to Austin, Texas, I wanted to go and meet other developers, designers, and other entrepreneurs and just expand the circle of people to help benefit some of the projects I was working on. And so I'd go to meetup groups and I was reluctant because it's not really my thing and it was something new. But one of the things I learned while I was there is that it has that aspect of playing a game with family members has in that the game is structure that can empower the conversation. It gives you that crutch, right? And I don't mean crutch in a bad way, by the way. But when you go to some of these meetup groups, a lot of times, especially the entrepreneur ones, they will have a presentation. And that presentation is kind of like what the game is. It's a structure to a group of people that then can be the foundation for conversation. So if you're listening to the presentation, you're taking notes, you get that opportunity to be in your head and listen as everyone else is listening. But then when it comes time to mingle and talk, you have something that you're interested in that you know everyone else is interested in that you can then talk about and discuss and get into a little bit more. And I think that is a perfect environment for an introvert to feel more like an extrovert because you're around other like minded people. You're talking about things you're all interested in. There's that structure there. And so if you're looking to expand your ability as an introvert to get out and do more things, I think that is a great place to start is to go to networking events just simply through like Meetup, other apps that provide that type of experience. Definitely doing those things is really valuable. But I think the biggest thing that's helped me more than anything else is by marrying an extrovert. My wife is a cycle instructor at Cycle Bar. And so she is basically DJ that dances and rides a bike at the same time. She plays music, she gets people involved, she talks with them afterwards. I mean, it's like an extrovert's dream, basically, to be the center of attention on stage and impacting other people's lives and getting very intimately acquainted with people. You're sweating together. And so she absolutely loves that. And I guarantee you that I've done more things in life because I've been married to an extrovert than if she was an introvert. Like if I could change her into an introvert, I don't think I would. In fact, I know I wouldn't because I would be more comfortable, I think, if she was an introvert. But being comfortable all the time isn't a good thing. You have to give yourself stressors in life, which is why I like going to the gym because it's not comfortable lifting weights and sweating and putting all that effort in there. But comfort equals stagnation. When you're active and when you're pushing against comfort, getting out of your comfort zones, that equals growth. So if you're not growing right now for whatever reason, it's probably because you're too comfortable and you need to do uncomfortable things. That's what's hard about this is finding those ways to do those uncomfortable things and forcing yourself to do it. And a lot of times it, it's not so much that you can't do the thing, it's that you don't want to do it in a particular way. So look for ways of doing it different. Like when I was a kid, we always had like vegetables to us were canned vegetables. It was like canned beans, lima beans, those square carrots and corn that would come in a can, and that was vegetables. And so we never really liked vegetables. But now all I eat is vegetables. Like I said, I switched to a plant-based diet 12 years ago. So all I eat basically is vegetables. So what was the change? Well, now I do stir fry and I roast the vegetables and I do all these different things with them and I eat more of them, all these different varieties, and I cook them in ways to where they're just absolutely delicious. I put spices on them. So I could eat canned vegetables that are just heated out of a can, or I could have these rich bowls mixed with all these different grains and things. And so I was able to learn to love vegetables versus hate them, but it was how they were prepared, right? So, in the same ways, you may not, as an introverted person, want to necessarily do extroverted things the way typical extroverts do them. But how can you repackage that and do some of those types of things, but in ways that you find enjoyable? That's, I think, the key. And so I've given you a couple different clues like the networking, games, those types of things. I could probably sit and think of a number of other things as well. I think asking questions, finding ways to be around like minded people, at least in the beginning, and learning to have those conversations without getting too exhausted by them. And by all means, if you start to get exhausted, take a break, come back a little bit recharged, and just take your time to focus on one person instead of so many. Try to cut away, find a person in the group that you have the most common with, and then initiate a conversation about something that maybe you have in common and that you're both passionate about to kind of recharge and then come back to the group later. And again, stretching yourself is not a bad thing. I mean, feeling that discomfort and that getting drained in an extroverted situation for an introvert, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It feels bad, but it's kind of like going to the gym where you're lifting weights and you're pushing yourself. A lot of times it doesn't feel good. It's exhausting and you're tired, but you know it's causing growth. In that same way, think about it like that when you come to dealing with other people. It may be exhausting, it may be tiring, but it's pushing you to grow and you're going to be better because of it. Hopefully, those things are useful to you and you found something in today's show that's going to help you in some way to live a more balanced and healthy life. So if you like today's show, you found something useful, please high five that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you get access to all the updates. And if you want to listen on the go, check out the audio version of the Remote Creative Podcast over at anchor.fm/remote creative. Get out there and create some greatness.